I'm your host, Brandon Groce, and I want to welcome you to Real Talk, brought to you by Editor X, the world's most powerful no-code web design platform for designers and creatives alike. Real Talk is a live show where we share with you exciting design, news, trends, career advice, and conversations with thought leaders in the space, entrepreneurs, agency owners, and more around no-code, UI, UX, product design, and the marketing spaces, and on top of that, so much more. If that sounds right up your alley, do not forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you can come back each week to get your daily and also, if you feel so, don't forget to like this video. It helps tremendously. So with that said, let's jump into today's conversation. All right, guys, I'm not gonna lie to you. For whatever reason, my intro decided to clip out, but hopefully, let me know if you guys are here. Welcome. I can't wait for you all, to those who are watching live and those who are going to be watching this replay. We have an amazing guest today. His name is David Rosenblatt. I'm beyond excited that we finally been able to have some of his time. We've been trying to plan this for I feel like 4 months now, just to get him on. And also my schedule has been a little crazy. So thank you for all of your patience. And David can hear me right now, but we're going to bring it on stage in just a second. But I want to give him a nice little intro. Ladies and gentlemen, this gentleman is an entrepreneur, a agency owner as well. He has 30 plus years of experience in all of what he's done in his lifetime. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to steal all his thunder. We have the time to ask him as many questions on really what he's done in his career, as well as I kind of want to have him drop a little bit of what he's done himself before I actually kind of steal that away from him. So please welcome David Rosenblatt to the stage. I can't wait to get all of the an hour's not going to be enough, but we're going to be talking about today, how he got started, what his background is, and really, just as the title suggests here today, how to get started as an agency owner, what's important, what type of structuring do you need, pricing, and all that. So we're going to have a good 45-minute discussion about Dave, what he's done with his career, as well as what we can get from him to help us start ours. So with that said, please help me welcome David Rosenblatt to the stage, my friends. What's going on, David?
Hey, Brandon, thank you for having me on. It's been a long time coming, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
For sure, man, and likewise. And of course, I apologize. I have no idea why the intro skipped out on us. I guess the world was just like, we don't need this. Let's get to David. So, things work out as needed. So, without me stealing the words out of your mouth, David, can you give everybody who is watching here with us and those who are going to be watching, and especially those when we send the replay of this to our email list, can you give people a little bit of an insight in just 1 to 2 sentences? Well, not 1 to 2 sentences. I'll let you take the length, but just what you have done throughout your career, the 30 years, and where you are at today.
Sure. So I started a business in 1984 called Software Support Group. That business started out as being IBM mainframe tech support services, and over time became a company, an international company that provided what's called service management consulting to very large enterprises. So some of our clients were AT&T, Southern Bell, The Limited. There's a company, Telefónica was the national telephone company of Spain. Bancomer and Banamex were the two primary banks in Mexico. We've done business in Australia for the Australian Navy. And this was the services we provided were basically how you manage the business of information technology on a worldwide basis in a way that follows the sun, so that there was never a time where an enterprise wasn't able to provide support services to their employees, their internal employees. During that time, we've had a lot of interesting projects. I think one of the ones that for me was most interesting was that we were hired by a university who was added to the DARPA project. Um, this project was basically ended up being called DARPANet, and basically in the 50s, DARPA asked a question: how can you communicate from any place to any place, no matter where you are, no matter what's happening? Their purpose for that was, of course, this was during the Cold War, and they wanted the people who authorize the launch of nuclear weapons to be able to authorize them, and they were worried that they wouldn't be able to get to a secure phone, for example, to authorize the launch. So they made a DARPA challenge. Technology took a long time coming to get there, but eventually a number of universities put together a network, and anybody in one university could access any terminal, any computer on another university. There was a second round of universities added, and when that happened, one of the colleges hired us because we were, again at the time, mainframe tech support specialists, and they were all excited. But then they realized they were opening up their mainframe computer system to a large number of very smart young people who didn't have a lot of time, or who did have a lot of time on their hands, and they started worrying about things like grades, financial records, tuition payments, and they needed that separated out. So we created what's called a logical partition to separate their instance of DARPANet out. So I've had the same email address for 40 some years. So that was a very interesting, because it was part of being kind of the helping to be involved in what became the internet, because this was before the internet had been commercialized. Yeah. Since that time, we grew to about a 50-man agency. I sold the agency when I got into a bad accident. I sold the agency, thought I was going to retire. That probably lasted about 3 weeks or so. I was helping a friend of mine who wanted to start a business, showing him the steps he had to go through to start a legitimate business. And as part of that, he needed a website. Didn't know anything about websites, but he couldn't afford $10,000, $15,000 for one. So I had heard about Wix and said, let me see what I can do. I built him a website. I wouldn't write home about it, but it worked. Then somebody else had saw it and said, hey, do you think you'd do that for me? And I'm like, sure, why not? After about the fourth time, I told excuse me, the person that they would have to pay me something. And they said, fine, what do you want to get paid? $300. So my first the first website I got paid for, I made $300 on it. Things have changed a bit since then.
A lot of it.
A lot of it. So we now have a small agency of 4 people: sales, technology, UX design, database architecture, Velo coding, and graphics and video graphics design.
Man.
And
so
and also during that time,
actually, yeah, continue, please, because so far you're basically like, yeah, I helped build the internet. I made a company, 50 employees, more. Please give us more.
so then also during that time, I went back to school, and I'm finishing up my master's in IT in UX design. And
that's amazing.
I've helped a couple of other businesses start up. I've started in total 5 businesses. One was a pretty wonderful disaster. But you learn more from your mistakes than your successes, and I learned a lot from that one. and the others were rather successful. Uh, Software Support Group was certainly the most successful, um, and now we have SSG Web Services, and I, I'm I'm I consider myself to be very lucky because I don't know the difference between work and play. You know, I get up in the morning, I enjoy what I do. Um, I don't have a problem working 10 or 12 hours because to me it's all playing around anyways. So it's great to be able to earn a living and enjoy what you do.
I love that, man. And so, with all that being said, first off, thank you for sharing that awesome story. I don't even feel like I got the full breadth of that story, like ever, even when we've talked for the. I feel like it's almost been a year. I think we're close to a year, and when we've known each other, but I've never gotten the full breakdown of that. So thank you for breaking that down. And I hope everybody who's listening, I'm seeing the comments of like incredible story. This is awesome. I can't wait to get some of the gems out of this. You guys are gonna get a lot. So David, so work and play. What are the steps for the people who are listening to us, listening to the replay? How do we get to being able to work and play like you? What are the first few steps, or what you would consider, just like how you helped your friend start their business? What are the first few things you would recommend people to have in order when starting a business?
Well,
or an agency, however you want to take that.
yeah, well, I think an agency is a business. So the first step is really to start a business. And there's a difference between having a true legitimate business and putting up a shingle and saying, hey, I do this thing, right? I am not a big believer in freelancers that go out and just sort of put up their hand and say, yeah, I can do this and I can do that. I think that to protect both yourself, your reputation, your business, and your clients and client base, that it's really important to have a true legitimate business. So, you know, the steps are actually pretty simple. You need to create a business structure, meaning, for example, a company that's a corporation or an LLC. I would not be a solopreneur. I would not want to be in a partnership. The reason, and I should say to begin with, I'm not an accountant. I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to give legal or
financial and legal advice.
Right? But yeah, exactly. But there are some things that I've learned along the way, and
right.
So you know, being an LLC gives you a lot of advantages over just being somebody with your hand up saying I can do this work. So one of the advantages that people don't think about too often is that you get the value of what's called a corporate veil. And the corporate veil protects you and you as a person and your individual assets, like if you own a house or a car, from ever being sued and taken away from you, as long as you haven't done anything illegal or fraudulent. But you know, if you've made a mistake and the client gets all upset and makes all kinds of threats, well, they can threaten the company, but they can't threaten you. And so that corporate veil becomes very important. You also need to go online to irs.gov and get an employee identification number. This is the thing we all hate to do because this is what allows them to tax us, but it's pretty important. And then the more difficult part is creating the if you're doing an LLC, the membership agreement. If it's just you, it's a lot easier. If you have a partner, you have to be thinking of things like what happens when one partner wants to leave. How do they get value out of their contribution, but not take everything away from the company because the other partner wants to continue, for example.
Right.
So having that document in place sets the rules. Um, and those rules can be really important. As an example, when I started Software Support Group, it didn't take very long for us to grow to the point where I couldn't run a business and do sales and manage projects all at the same time. I
Right.
hired in a very long time friend, somebody who to me was the best salesman I have ever met in my life. And he was looking for a new job. I was looking for somebody who could sell. I told him I couldn't afford to pay him what he was worth, but I would make him a partner in the business. And so even though he and I had been friends since we were about 3 years old, um, and we are still friends, uh, 5 years later. Um, but one of the reasons we're friends is that part of our governance was that we had set up a structure of what happens if one of us wants to leave. After about 10 or 15 years, he had decided he'd had enough traveling around. I mean, he was traveling all over the world for our work. Um, and he needed to be home. He needed to be with his wife, with his children that were growing. And we had created a structure that I was taught was called a Chinese auction. I'm not sure if that's if other people have heard of that or not, but basically,
Not at all.
the
Not.
idea of a Chinese auction is that the person who wants to leave provides in writing what they want out of the business. So if they say I want to leave and I think my shares are worth $100,
Yeah.
they put that in writing and say you other partners have to pay me $100 to get my membership shares to leave. But that partner doesn't know if you're going to accept that or you're going to turn it on them and say, no, you have to buy my shares at your proposed price. And what this does is it keeps people kind of honest, right? If you don't know when you want to leave, when you want to dissolve the partnership, if you don't know if the amount per share that you're suggesting is what you have to pay or what you're going to receive, you tend to be a lot more realistic about it. And in our case, when he put that in writing, he was probably within 2 or 3% of what I thought it was worth, right? So we happened to be very close. In terms of a dollar amount, we happened to be very close in terms of how he would leave, all of those things. And we finally had to put it into a legal document. He got his attorney, I got my attorney, and I'll never forget this. Probably within 20 minutes, these two attorneys had us at each other's throats. They were just, everything that we had agreed to, they were throwing out. So finally, we asked the two attorneys to leave. And I said, Stu, here's what I want out of it. He said, well, here's what I want out of it. I said, well, what if we did it this way? Well, that works for me. Yeah, that works for me. In 15 minutes, we solved all of our problems because we had already had the governance set up. We both knew what to expect. So I think that's a very important part of the structure of your governance. And as a result,
When you mean structure of your governance, because I want to pause and let's break a couple things down here. And we also have, I know I mentioned we'll have like questions at the end, but I think there was a very contextualized question too, and it kind of is exactly how I want to break things down. Because so far we've talked about, let's actually set up a business. Let's not go freelancer. Let's make sure we have a structure in place to avoid liability, and also it can help you with taxes in those bullet points there. So I kind of want to go to that, and then also talk a little bit about because in this the situation that you're walking us through, you had some sort of partnership there. We had a question in the chat. It's pretty simple, but any individual can create a business, right? Just like you laid out for us. You can be an individual. You can go make a business today, and it's as simple as getting an EIN number. And I don't know all the steps that you had to do. I literally just go to Zen Business, and it just walks me through whatever. But just from your mouth, any individual can start a business today.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, if I don't know what kind of restrictions there might be if you're not a U.S. citizen or something like that, but that's what you get an attorney for.
Right.
So, anyways, you need the EIN, the business structure. With that, I live in the state of Ohio. Every state is slightly different, but in Ohio, the state, you create your business with the state. The state will send you your corporate papers. You take your EIN, your corporate papers, go to a bank, and the bank will now give you a corporate bank account. And with that, you are ready to go. You have the ability to pay bills. You have, assuming there's money there, but you have the ability to pay bills. You have the ability to receive money. You have a legal structure, and you have the ability to be taxed by the government. So now you have the minimum structure that you need to have a legitimate business. That piece that I was talking about that was missing is that corporate governance, which is something that an attorney would probably, could probably give somebody a template for it. Yeah, kind of a template. You can probably get online, and then you customize it to what is specific to you. And these elements are important no matter what your business is. The other thing that I found that I learned to be very important, and I do now, is to have a contract with that you can provide your clients. And
Gotcha.
I actually have two contracts. I have one that we provide to mid-sized businesses that are a little more structured, a little larger, that is a much more comprehensive contract. And then I've got a 3-page contract for smaller businesses and individuals that we would build websites for that isn't quite as in-depth. But but the value of the contract is that both people know the rules and you can refer to those rules. The way we structure our contracts is that we have a section in the contract that talks about the actual work we will be doing, and all it says is see addendum A. Everything else in the contract are all the kind of legal things, who's going to, how are you going to get paid? How often do you get paid? What are your liabilities? What's your limitation of liabilities? In the larger contract, we talk about what an independent contractor, what constitutes an independent contractor, so that the client doesn't get stuck with issues of paying us and then the government coming back and saying, no, that wasn't really a contractor, that should have been an employee. So setting up those kinds of rules are really important. And we, even in both contracts, one of the important clauses is the responsibilities that the client has. Usually the contracts I've seen other agencies have, they talk about all of the agency responsibilities, but the customer has responsibilities also, right? So we have in there, for example, that because this has happened, where if the client doesn't respond to a request for assets or information or whatever within a certain time period, that the entire contract becomes due and payable. This forces them to respond. Now, there's all kinds of ways of modifying it. So you could say, well, if you don't do it within a certain time period or notify us that it'll take longer. I mean, you can make it reasonable, but I'm guessing most people who have done this work before realize that when the client asks us, how long will it take to get this project completed? The answer is always, whatever it is going to be about twice as much time, because you as a client aren't going to get us what we need when we need it. And
Right.
it's almost always, when we tell somebody, oh, this will take us 2 weeks, it's a month and 2 weeks, because the client doesn't get us what they think they have. A lot of times client doesn't quite realize what they need. We'll ask them, do you have content that describes your company for the About Us section? Yeah, we have it. When they send it to us, it's 2 sentences, right? They don't understand what they need. So it's really important to have the limits on the client as to what their responsibilities are, as well as what your responsibilities are. The addendum then is a separate document, and that's where we put in all of the project activities. So, for example, how many pages? Or we actually use sections, not pages, but how many sections? What those sections are going to be? We're going to include Wix stores. We're going to exclude a payment plan that is not that does not come integrated into Wix, as an example. And in fact, I'm glad we have that in our contracts. We just built a website for an e-commerce company, and they wanted to use a product called Clover, which is their POS system and takes credit card processing. And they asked us, they said, well, it's really easy, put the Clover button on. Well, it's not so easy, and it takes a lot of time to integrate it and test it. And when you talk about payments, you're talking about a lot of security. And we told them that would be an additional charge, and their response was, no, it should be part of it. I said, no, look at the contract. It says that we are only going to use credit card processors that are directly integrated into Wix. So it's, as soon as they saw that, they said, oh yeah, you're right. That was the end of the discussion. And managing people's expectations is the hardest job for any of us to do, because we want, Brandon, we want the client to be happy, but at some point you have to say, I need to restrict the work also. So how do you keep that balance? And having a contract is a lot to keep that balance.
Yeah, so let's break that down, because so far we've talked about pretty much what tools and instruments and things do we need to have in order really to protect ourselves as business owners and as people who are doing this work, and also how to just keep people's expectations in check, and also, again, to defend yourself when there's an ask that is over what is in our contract, how to kind of like, hey, read, go back into the contract, this is not what was agreed upon. So I think, kind of to summarize everything that we've gone through so far, because we've gone through a lot, and I kind of want to dive back into some of it too, because a lot of it is a lot. And I feel like there's a lot of really good things that we can dive into each thing. So we also have Lee in the chat is asking some really good questions, and maybe we can fit in some of hers, but let's kind of go back through some of these things. So far, just to bullet point this, to summarize what we've gone through so far, is, again, I already mentioned this, how to protect ourselves and how to manage expectations, LLCs, EIN, or step one is making sure you have your LLC, your EIN, and also I think really just a banking account too. I think you mentioned this, but you didn't say it specifically, but making sure that you create another entity that is separate from you, that just does not, limited liability. Like you just want to create a whole nother entity where you're totally separate from your personal expenses, taxable whatevers.
Right,
And
because
then you, yeah,
the law looks at, if you set up a legitimate business, the law looks at that business as a separate entity, like a separate
yeah,
person, right? So you are able to kind of separate that business off from yourself. When you create an LLC, you also get the, as you had mentioned, tax advantages, right? So, for example, you own a car. That car costs you maintenance. It costs you a car payment monthly, insurance. Um, those things you can't deduct from your taxes, but
yes,
your company can deduct them if you're using them for business. Your computer, you go out and buy, you know, in our business, you want a fairly high level computer, costs whatever it costs you, and you pay for it. But if you're a business, you can depreciate it and deduct that. So a lot of expenses that you can't deduct as an individual, your company can deduct. And that can save you a lot of money. For those of us who our primary offices are our homes, you can deduct the cost of your mortgage, for example, a portion of it. Um, the way we do it is we figure out the square footage of the house, how much space is being dedicated to office space, and get a percentage and deduct that percentage from our mortgage. It's wonderful to be able to take these deductions, um, and if if you're doing enough business, that all those deductions become greater than a standard deduction, and helps you save a lot of money.
yeah. It's better than paying for something personally and getting taxed on the thing that you need for business. It's you said it. You said it best. Um, the next thing I kind of want to talk about. So we talked about governance and contracts. So some people who might be rewatching this and who have no idea, they're totally new to this business thing, and they just need like their handheld. They just want to do and build something themselves. Maybe they just want to be a business of one and subcontract out work. Do you have to have governance in place? I mean, I don't. So this is a learning experience for me as well. Do we have to have, as solopreneurs with a one-man LLC who has subcontractors, do we need a governance sort of? Unless we want to, is governance only for if we want to bring somebody in as a partner where we're splitting equity and stuff?
Well, so you can create an LLC called a single member LLC. That's for one person, right?
Okay.
And it's less important because you only have to deal with yourself as an owner. But having it in place um, also helps when things happen that you couldn't necessarily foresee. Um, so uh, Perhaps you're doing a wonderful, you're doing a great job and somebody wants to buy you. What are the rules for buying you? And part of this also gives you, one of the problems we have as solopreneurs is in many different situations, we have to wear both the black hat and the white hat all at the same time. And it's a real difficult thing to balance. But again, having the governance structure in place gives you the ability to follow a certain set of rules regardless of what's going on. The nice thing is that if it's just you, if you want to change those rules, it's really easy to change.
Yeah.
But I would
All right.
still
Cool.
have them in place. And the other thing is that it took me a long time to learn what rules should be in place that are really important to helping grow the business, and what rules your attorney or your accountant get kind of caught up on that really don't have a lot of value as the business person. Your attorney and your accountant should be advisors. They shouldn't tell you how to do your business. They should tell you,
Right.
they should be there to tell you when you're about to go from gray to, off the edge, right? Um, yeah. No,
Yes.
you can't buy a horse and deduct your horse as a business expense, right? But they should be able to tell you that. But you should be the one who says, hey, I think I want my business to own a horse. So,
I think what is it? It's like, how can we make this a business deduction versus like,
right,
is this a business deduction? And having that conversation with your CPA.
right. And it's also, by the way, important at the end of the year. Even if you're doing everything yourself, it's probably worth it to have an accountant who will go through and just make sure everything is done correctly. Um,
Yes.
Things like depreciation, people have a hard time with depreciation, making sure that uh, you're collecting and paying taxes in states that where you need to collect taxes. Most states don't tax services, but some do, and you have to be aware of that. Having an accountant will probably help you become aware of that, right? So that you know. I mean, one of the worst things is to not collect tax on a project that in a state where you should have, and then the state contacts you and says, "Hey, you owe us $2,000 in taxes. You never
Right.
collected it." Right there goes your
Yeah.
pocket plus some.
I think that's a really big point there too. Like, I feel like going from people really early, especially me. Like, I'm still really early on too. I still want to talk about contracts, but I think one of the, I mean, I'm still young with my business and stuff, but I kept reading like the secret weapon to savings is just like your biggest expense in your entire life, it will always be taxes. So like your secret weapon really needs to be a really good accountant. I've had my first one, they were absolutely terrible because I was reading all these books and there was like, if your accountant has these red flags and they're telling you can't, and plus I was asking different things. I was like, is this an expense versus how can we make this an expense? And actually like, some of your clients, do they, are you able to get them the things that I'm asking you deducted for them? And the books that I was reading, they were like, you should be able to get your food, your restaurants, but it's just how you're procuring your food. At what times are you eating out? Are they for client meetings? Are you working out at a cafe while you're eating? Like, it's very contextual in terms of like how you have to do these activities for it to be deducted. Because I see Lee in the chat was asking, or saying my accountant said I can write off my Starbucks orders to a certain amount, of course. And I was like, well, you might want to have a conversation because it's not from my experience, it's not this certain amount or a cap. It's how are you doing these activities, and does that make them? And again, this is not like advice. This is just my experience. Like David is also sharing here. But if you find a good bookkeeper that works with an awesome CPA, like that is a weapon that can not only save you money but get you a lot of money back at the quarterly, if that's how you're doing your taxes, or at the end of the year. Yeah. So okay.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I think that just having somebody who will look at your books quarterly to be sure that you're not doing something wrong. My
Mm-hmm.
experience has been that the IRS, unlike the commercials that you see on TV about how terrible they are, they're they're really not that unreasonable. If you do something wrong because you just didn't know that you were doing it wrong, and somebody says, "Hey, you did this wrong," and you go back to them and say, "Oh, I should have paid this amount of tax. I didn't realize it." They usually are pretty good about just fine, pay the tax. It's when they think you're trying to put one over on them, cheat the government, whatever. That's when you run into problems. As far as um, the woman Starbucks order, there are non-deductible expenses and there are deductible expenses. If you are having a business meeting, you can deduct your Starbucks order because you're having coffee while you're having while you're discussing business. It's my understanding, and I want to be careful because I'm not an accountant.
This is not to be construed, guys, as legal tax advice. We are sharing our experience,
Right,
and if you yes,
right.
just
So
double down.
if you're, but if you buy a cup of coffee while you're sitting at Starbucks waiting for your customer to come there, that cup of coffee isn't deductible. It's a non-deductible expense. If you buy your customer a cup of coffee and yourself a cup of coffee and discuss business, it is deductible. And there's also kind of reasonableness. Deducting a $10,000 dinner is probably going to get you in trouble, right? Deducting a $100 dinner for two people probably won't.
Yeah.
So but I always believed that you push the boundaries and let your accountant or your attorney say, no, you can't do that.
That's their job.
Right.
That's their job.
Right. And I was never afraid to go to the IRS and say, oops, I'm a dummy. I made a bad mistake. Let me correct it. Right. And we've never had problems as a result.
Yeah. All right, we could talk about taxes all day, and I'm seeing that we're about almost time to the Q&A section. I really wanted to really quickly recover back on the contracts, because it sounds like early on we were talking about lawyers, things like that, but some people who are starting out, they're like, ooh, am I going to... Well, first off, they might be scared about what that might cost and the complexity of that, or even understanding what the lawyer's giving them. What is a simple way you would recommend someone acquire a contract, or what is for somebody who's starting, what is the best way for them to, and you might even have, because for me, like I have to go to lawyers to do my contracts, and they are not cheap.
Right. Well, so what I would recommend would be, you could go to something like LegalZoom, and you want to look for a contract, a professional services contract. That's the kind of business we're in, right? Professional services. You could go to an attorney and ask if they have a boilerplate of a professional services contract that you can look at, start getting ideas of what's in there, so that you can start thinking about what I don't need in there and what I do need in there. Right.
Yeah.
And you want, my opinion is, you want to limit your contract as much as is reasonable, because when you hand a 20-page contract to a client, it's scary.
Yes.
Or most people, it will scare. If you're doing business with a $50 million, $100 million business, they're not going to be scared. They're just going to say, fine.
They're like, great.
Right. So knowing your business, your client, what you are like, and then taking a look at a boilerplate, and maybe then you go back to the lawyer and you say, look, I don't need this clause, this clause, this clause, this clause. There's you mentioned in clause number 3 something, and I kind of have a different way of doing it. It's not, it's still an expense, and it's going to cost you several $100s, but it shouldn't cost you several thousand. And over time, that contract, our contract is a living document. Over time, we modify it when we see something happens that we didn't anticipate, or there's mostly, it happens with unfortunate experiences where we weren't protecting ourselves where we might have. So don't be afraid to modify that contract.
Right.
And also, we keep what's an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, available. NDAs are almost all alike in what they're limiting, a reasonable NDA of what they're limiting people from disclosing. And we find that by sometimes with more legitimate businesses, bigger businesses, right, a 25, $50 million client, that if we go to them and say, look, if you want to talk about your website in depth, we're happy to sign your NDA. Here's our NDA. If you want to sign that, we don't care. And not be afraid to sign NDAs, because typically all they're trying to do is protect their own uh, intellectual property. They're not trying to
Right.
keep you from doing your business. And I've talked to people who've said, "Oh no, I don't want to sign NDAs because then I can't build websites for anyone else," and that's just not true.
Yeah, it's purely for intellectual property, like you said, and just keep basically just to keep the secret.
Right.
Um, and let's finish. This will be the last sort of thing. I really wanted to talk about pricing today, but we might just need to have more sessions with you, David. I think we covered a lot of really good fundamental fundamental things here today. Where it's just like, make sure you just get your structure set up. Make sure that you take the liability away from you. Just make sure that you're building a whole nother entity. Make sure that you have your LLC, EIN, bank. Make sure, it's always good to have governance sort of, I don't even know, governance structure, I think is how you referred to it. But
Governance document.
document. And then making sure you have contracts. And I think, how do you feel about this? This is the last thing I'll say about contracts. So we talked about going to a lawyer, but how do you feel about like the boilerplates and templates that you see like floating around the internet? I know still you would probably have to add in some of the things that you've added in manually, but even then it's not in the legalese, or it might not be as I don't know the term I'm looking for, but it might not be as official if you're adding those things in plain language versus if you worked with a lawyer to do those things. How do you feel about just the templates that you see online, just as a contract, and adding some of your own?
The few I've seen online are fine to start out with. And
Okay.
um, remember, there is a legal value to having a contract. There's also a psychological value. The
Right.
client knows that you're a serious business, that you should be taken, you should be dealt with as a business, not as, especially if for younger people who start out. I was 25 when I started my first business, and it's hard to be taken seriously. These things show that you understand the nature of how to execute business, and there's a psychological value. The value of having a lawyer do it is that they understand the jargon. They're usually more clear in what that sentence is saying. But
Yeah.
write it start out and write it yourself. If it's unclear, you're going to find out when there's a problem.
And that's how we learn. You
And
do it, then you
and
get
there you go.
spanked,
Right,
and you fix it later. So
right.
yeah, I think that's great advice. All right, so let's hop into some of these questions because there are really good ones, and Lee's been popping them out. So let's see. I'm trying to find your first question, Lee, and I think it was in reference to retainers and aha. Okay, here's your first one. So, how much do you invest in marketing, and how much time is spent on obtaining new clients?
Well, we have somebody whose their only job is marketing and sales. So, um, I guess that would be 100% of the time. If you're just by yourself, the real issue is that when you are both performing the service and doing the sales and marketing, you're kind of like a hunter. You can only eat what you catch, and as soon as you're done eating, you got to go out and find something else to catch. So coming together as a group, even if it's not a corporate structure or LLC membership structure, can help you. Maybe it's of value to get 2 or 3 or 4 freelancers together, and maybe one person who's a marketing and sales guy, and let that person go. Pay them a commission. Pay them 50% of whatever they bring in, because it hasn't cost you anything. You just it didn't cost you any time or money to get them to do the work for you in sales. And you just tell them, here's the minimum that you can sell it for, whether it's if you're selling by the hour, which I don't like, or by fixed project, or by the day, which is really the hour, risk reward. I mean, there are a couple of different payment structures, but if you have no business, if you have no clients, if you're not building a website, you need to be spending 100% of your time on sales and marketing. One of the things that I've seen with younger people, and I did the same thing, is don't expect people to come to you. You have to go to them, and you have to go to them often. Don't, just because they say no once doesn't mean they'll say no the second time or the 5th time, right? You gotta be politely persistent. When I sell, and the client says, "Oh, I don't really know," I'm like, "Okay, well, you think about it. I don't want to be I don't want to be a pain in the butt to you, but I am going to give you a call every 3 days, and you can expect that." Then you got to also make those calls. And as long as you're managing their expectations, they don't get mad at you for calling all the time. And eventually, maybe you just wear them down, right? Maybe you just, I mean, I've squeaky wheel theory, right? Just, all right, I'll hire you. Just stop hounding.
And that happens more often than we think. That's like really counterintuitive.
It is, and I mean, people. There was a saying of the client's always right. And my theory is that it's just not the case. The client always knows what they want to achieve. They don't know how to do it, and because they don't know how to do it, they don't know what the right way is. If they knew everything, they don't need you, and they don't need me, and they do need me, and they do need you, right? And so don't be afraid to tell them that, I've had potential clients say, well, look at my website and tell me, what do you think? And it's like, remember that commercial about where the woman asks her husband, how do I look in these new jeans, right? And it's like, You do not want to answer that question. And it's sort of like, that's what they're doing. There's what they really want is for you to say, oh, it's perfect and wonderful. But if it's not, don't be afraid to politely tell them where it's not right, because that's where you show your value. That sells, because you're showing your value of what you know versus what they know. And don't be afraid to tell them either in terms of some specifics. Mostly when you sell, we're sometimes afraid to give out too much information. We think we're going to tell the client everything they know to do the work themselves. You want to be careful. Sometimes I found that if you give them too much information, you give them so much information, they can't really remember it all. What they do remember is, this guy sure seemed to know what he was talking about, right? This agency, I can see that they understand my business because they're asking questions about it. They have done this before. I can go to their website and see their portfolio. That's nice. So I can see if they, the quality of their work. But before you can sell the quality of your work, You have to sell the fact that you can meet their business needs. You know, how often do you go to your client and say, you know, on average, our clients realize a 12.2 ROI on their investment. I mean, that means something, right? Yeah, you're going to spend $5,000 on me on average over the course of a 12-month period. Our clients realize a 30% ROI, which means if you spend 5,000, you're going to make about 7,500 on it. That's what we
Right.
be selling. All right.
So that I want to take that, and I'm gonna jump to one of Ari's questions. And Dave, how are you on time? I know we have like 4 minutes, but
Yeah,
there are a couple good questions here. How much time do you have?
I
Do
have
you have
time.
to jump immediately?
No,
You
no,
got
no.
time?
Yeah.
All right, awesome, sweet. Because we got a couple things. So with that being said, so when you're in business a while, you have a lot of things to leverage. You have case studies. You can say things like, typically our clients see a 12 point X return on investment. How would you assess? Oh, this is Ari's question. How would you assess quoting for a client? Oh wait, hold up, not that one yet. Ari. Considering the fast-paced nature of tech, what kind of advice do you have for new business owners getting their bearings in the industry when they don't have the case studies to leverage? I know we kind of talked about this in piecemeal throughout our conversation, but how would you specifically, like sales, how would you go out in terms of selling yourself as somebody brand new to somebody you want to work with?
Well, so one of the things that I did when I very first started in 2015 with this was, first, Wix had something that they don't have now, unfortunately, which is they had classes that you took and you got certified. And so you could call yourself somebody who's certified. You can now, I don't know all the rules for partners, but become a partner with Wix. So you can say I'm a certified partner. That adds
Mm-hmm.
legitimacy, right? Um, you can go on to freelancing sites like Upwork, and don't you don't want to be too cheap though. If you're brand new, um, there's always this feeling like if I charge too much, the potential client is going to turn me down because they can't afford it. My advice is, if they're not willing to pay you what you consider to be a reasonable fee, then you're going to have problems with them in the first place. Having also, there's nothing that stops somebody from creating case studies and making up their websites. I mean, you know, if you've never sold an Editor X website, nothing stops you from making a website for a pretend company in Editor X and showing what you're capable of. Or for that
Nice.
matter, creating the website for your own business in Editor X. And then you
All
have,
right. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, no, go. Keep going. Keep going.
Well, so when you do things like that, then you have to listen to the potential customer, ask them leading questions, and listen to them. You know, people tend to want to explain how to do something, right? You ask them, well, what's this website going to do? Well, I want to have you put my T-shirts on the store, and I want you to create these coupons, and I want the coupon to be sent by email. No, no, no. That's not really what you want. What you want is a marketing system to be able to market the products you have on, in your store. Half the time when we talk to people about Wix stores, I mean, they don't know the difference between products and variants. So you have to educate them. And educating them, when you can go to a client and say, you don't have 15 different t-shirts. You have one t-shirt in 15 different colors. That's one product, 15 variants, and explain that to them. They're like, oh, you're right. Now you become kind of a thought leader, right? We always ask, in the case of e-commerce, how are you going to satisfy fulfillment? Because they don't think about that. They think, I'm going to put something on the internet. It's going to be seen by 100 million people. Everybody wants it. They're going to pay a lot of money for it. And they don't even think about how are they going to get that item to the person who's paid for it. And when you start talking to them about it, do you have to collect taxes? Do you have to collect taxes on shipping? There are some states that you have to pay taxes on whatever you charge for shipping. How are you going to charge for shipping? You know, if you're going to charge, if you have a product that's just physically heavy, right?
Yeah.
And you're charging by weight, and it costs $10 to ship a $7 item, no one's buying it. So you got to be thinking of how would you do that, and when the client isn't already talking about that, it's time to ask those questions. One, gives you an idea of how much they understand their own business. Two, gives you an idea of, or gives you the opportunity for them to see that you are an expert in this, that there is more to it than just making a pretty picture, that here are all the things that lay behind it, and you understand that. Because that's what, at the end of the day, that's really what's going to get them to buy from you, is that they believe that you understand all the nuances that they do not.
Yeah, that's well put, Dave. I think to kind of bullet point what you mentioned here, it's like the leverage, as somebody new, you want to find leverage that you can actually utilize to be like, hey, I am a certifiable, or I really know, I know my shit in this arena. Here's what tells you that. So you mentioned the Wix partners, certifications, things like that, or even better, like actually having work that whether you've made up actually shows what you're capable of. I think those are two really big things that you can leverage as somebody who's new to get new clients. Have certifications, have partnerships with brands like Wix, and I think that even goes into I know Ari's in the chat here, but I know there's a couple people in our community as well that leverage being a Wix partner and their marketplace. Just like you were saying, you could be on Upwork, and even if you're on Upwork or on the Wix marketplace, you can't just sit there like Dave was referring to earlier. You actually still have to do sales. You have to go out. I know maybe the Wix marketplace gives you some leads, but you still have to make sure you are able to show those potential clients that you understand them, just like Dave was saying, by asking the right questions so that you can pull information out of these potential clients to basically understand their problem a little bit better, and then understanding the challenges or the problems that they're dealing with. You kind of reflect those with that new information you have. You basically say, so it sounds like you're dealing with X. You don't need, and even because sometimes people come to us, like David was saying, they want something specific without really telling you the problem. They're like, oh, we want you to do blank. But when you start asking about the problem, you're like, oh, so you're dealing with this sort of marketing issue, like the example Dave was talking about earlier. And they'll be like, yes. And you're like, great. So it sounds like to me you're having this marketing issue. In my experience, it actually would be to attain that goal, we might want to do blank, blank, and blank. So you might actually be able to help them a little bit easier. And through all that questioning, helping you understand their business better, when you spit back to them the words that they gave you with how you know to solve the problem better, they'll be like, oh, not only did they listen, but they also have might even more cost-effective way and more efficient way of helping us get over our challenge hump. So, all right.
And I might add that when the client sees you as the expert, right, you don't have to be afraid to charge them the true value of what you're doing. You know, it drives me nuts to see people say, oh, $300 websites. I mean, you cannot make a living off of that.
Yeah, not at all.
Right.
So with that being said, let's and Dave, feel free to cut into be like Brandon. I'm done because there's like 2 or 3 really good questions that I want to get to. We're still good on time for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. I think Lee had a question about there was retainers and then there was pricing. So we'll start with the retainer thing. So Lee's asking, what is your strategy to go from successful project to a retainer, or do you not seek that as a goal?
You're talking about, I'm assuming Lee is talking about uh, providing maintenance and support contracts. And that's
Yes, I'm assuming.
right. And with Wix, that's kind of an interesting problem, isn't it? Because one of the things that Wix sells is that it's easy to support and maintain your own website. We always offer the client the opportunity to sign up for support and maintenance and or SEO support maintenance. We provide 30 days of support after we publish a project. And sometimes the client sees the value right away of, oh, I know I'm supposed to be able to do this, but I can't figure it out. And I can't figure out how to add a new PDF. I can't figure out how to structure the variants. It's just not something I do well. I'll hire someone to do it. SEO is another area where I find most of our clients and potential clients don't really understand. They kind of get it generally, but they don't understand what it takes, and they don't understand how much time SEO takes to improve. Improving your SEO takes a long time. They don't understand the balance of balancing things you need to do for your business that might rank you down lower, but you have to do them anyways. And what do you do to counter that by ranking you up? Wix, it was kind of interesting. In a way, Wix it kind of is their own worst enemy, because their claim to fame is anybody can build a website with Wix tools. And it is true. Anybody can build a website. Is it professional looking? That's a different question. Does it meet its objectives? Might be a different question. Can it get found? Another question. But anybody can build it. So we have a difficult time sometimes because Wix, people who want to go to Wix think it should be easy. They don't, and it's our jobs to explain to them, this is a complex system that you're building. And even though the tools make it easy, I can give you all the tools in the world. I don't know that I want to live, or you can give me all the tools in the world. I don't know you want to live in a house that I build. I'm not a builder. So, when the pipes burst, I need somebody there to fix them, and they're going to burst if I build that house. So I don't know if that answers Lee's question, but hopefully it gets to it. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I muted because I was typing. Thank you. No, I think that does answer. I think that does answer the question. I kind of want to add on to that as well, because I think what helps too is like when we do a project, right? We might be doing the website, but I think what is also important is that the people that we're doing work with, they also understand that we have sub services where, for example, like on some of my web dev or even my content contracts, I might be working with them for producing a certain show, live streams, a certain amount of etc. But in basically in my, I'm gonna call it a pitch deck, but really in my, I forget what I actually call it, but like basically literally the deck that I send to anybody where it's just like, this is all I do. And I also have it in my contracts as well, where it's just like, these are the services I'm providing you. By the way, here are some add-on services that we haven't really talked about, but at least you know that these are other things that I that I offer, and here's the price cost. And if you guys saw something that you wanted to add on, you can just it's in that PDF. And they're like, oh, sometimes they're like, we didn't even know that you did accompanying X, Y, and Z. Can we actually add that to, even though we didn't have a conversation about it? So I think it's really important to the things, whether it's support, maintenance, and all that stuff, even if you haven't had a conversation on it, somewhere in your documentation or what you're sending through your contracts, your proposals, in that word that really is escaping me. It's not a pitch deck, but it's really just like all the things that you're, capabilities deck. All the things you're capable of doing. Duh. Having all of the services, the main things that you're working with them on, but also some of the sub things that you do offer that they might not want to do right now, but in the back of their mind, you're kind of planting a seed like, oh, we can work with, Brandon or whomever in this capacity. And if we wanted to, we also have these other things that, other people we're talking to might not even have shown us, and we can have like a all-in-one by working with this person. So I think we're good there.
Right, and I think you want to have these retained services available because, again, when we're talking about, if you're hunting, you eat what you hunt and then you go out hunting again. This is like the farming part, right? Where now here's some reoccurring revenue that gives you breathing room to go out and look for customers, bigger, more professional customers. We find that when we talk to larger organizations, we are rarely arguing over money. They want to know, do we understand what they want to accomplish? When will the project be finished? And how will they know that everything is done? It's very rare that we have to quibble over money. It takes as much time to get a $2,000 website in terms of sales and discussions and all of that as it does a $10,000 or $20,000 website. It's amazing. So you shouldn't be afraid to go after the big ones.
Definitely.
I mean, the Wix has the capability to meet the need.
For sure. And Nina's learned that very recently, where we were looking for people to interview more on this platform, and she had just reached out to people who had like 80,000, 100,000 plus. What's it called? It's just scared to even approach them, and then quite a few actually got back to her, and she was like, "Wait, what? We weren't necessarily selling websites, but the people you don't think just by doing things, you're like." It's just the fear that holds you back, and then when you get into it, you're like, oh wow, I actually got a response. So it's funny how, like, even some of, I'm sure probably a lot of the people who are in this, watching this, or a lot of my first large clients, I thought were actually, when they emailed me, I thought it was fake, or in the fact that I thought it was fake, that's just like, oh, this couldn't happen to me. It's the same thing where some people, when they want to reach out to people, they're like, oh, they'll never work with me. But that's only the case because we haven't been scared and done the actions required to work with them in the first place. But
yeah, I would agree.
One last question. And Nina, I didn't mean to put you out there. This was me saying, like, you've done an excellent job. I'm really proud of you, and also I just wanted to share with everybody that story. I think there's a lot there. All right, last one, David, and then I think we're okay. The last two ones are question. I'll combine them. They're about pricing. So Lee is asking, how do you handle taxes on your projects? Do you build that into your project costs? And then on top of that, Ari is asking, how do you quote your clients? Are you project-based or hourly? So I'll let you figure out how you want to tackle that, whether you want to talk about hourly or project-based or value, and then if you add taxes to that.
All right, so the state that we're incorporated in doesn't require us to collect taxes on services. So the answer is we don't collect taxes and we don't worry about taxes because we're not required to. If you are, and even reselling depends on how you resell Wix as to whether you have to pay, you should be paying tax on that or not. So that gets into some nuances that probably an accountant would be better to talk to than I am. As far as how we price, that's like I think one of the biggest issues that Wix designers, developers deal with, and it's a hard one. I don't like our charging by the hour or by the day, which is really just an aggregation of what I think is going to be by the hour. And the reason I don't like charging by the hour is that as I do more and more work and get better and better at what I do, I can do it faster and faster. So my first website might have taken me a week to get a page done. Now I get a page done in an hour. I can't charge a week's worth of, charge for a full week to do 1 hour's worth of work. And 1 hour's worth of work, the client really needs to be paying for all the time that it took for me to be able to build that page in 1 hour versus 1 week. And so there's this dissonance there. Clients like it because they understand it. You put in an hour, I pay you an hour. But it's kind of a vestige of the industrial age, I think. And we talk them out of it by basically saying, it's a vestige of the industrial age. Most of our work is done as a fixed price value contract. We look at what is the value of the services we're providing to the client at that moment. So if, for example, we have a client who has an online art gallery, they sell original artwork anywhere from like $3,000. I think the most expensive I've seen was like $90,000. And they do not have a physical gallery. So what's the value to them of having a high quality website? Well, they're dealing with people who are spending a lot of money. That means they're probably more sophisticated than an average person. They want to be treated well, so things have to work right. You can't have a website that, sometimes things go wrong on it. And the value to them is if that site doesn't do what they want it to do, when they want it to do it, and in the manner in which their customers expect, they don't have a business. So what's the value? The value, it's a very high value, and we would charge more for it. On the other hand, I have a client that they put up microwave towers and cell towers. Their website is, quite honestly, it's a big fancy billboard. In fact, the truth is that if it weren't for the fact that people don't think you're legitimate if you don't have a website, they wouldn't even have a website. It doesn't bring them any business. And they have low value to their website. So we charge them much less money. The other, and that takes experience to understand the relative value and not be afraid to charge based on the value. We have clients, nonprofits, who need to meet certain requirements for the grants that they get. And so what's the value of the website? Well, if we build it to meet those grant values, they keep getting the grants. So high value. You have to understand, I think, how the business earns its revenue and what is of value to it. The other thing we've done, I learned this in my old business when we did work for the federal government. For some larger clients, particularly clients who have deadlines, they want something done by a certain time. We do what's called a risk reward contract. And it's a little more complicated than this, but kind of basically, we provide a fixed price to them based on what are the perceived value. And so let's say, we say it'll take 3 months to complete the project, and we're going to charge you $90,000. We have in the contract for we have a leeway of, let's say, 10%. So 3 months, it could be, 90 days. So we have a 90-day kind of leeway of, we could get it done earlier by 9 days, later by 9 days is okay. But if we can beat those leeways, we get a bonus. So if we get this thing done in 2.5 months, we get a bonus. You pay us more than what the agreed amount price was, because we got it done in advance for you, gave you the extra time. On the other hand, if it takes more than the 90 days and plus the leeway, we have to pay them back. We lose money for every day that goes by that we don't have that site up and published and meeting the completion criteria. And it takes a certain kind of situation for that to work. But where that situation exists, it works great. And it's a good opportunity if you to earn extra money by working less, right? I mean, you get paid more to work less. But you do have the risk, which also means you have to have a well-defined contract with well-defined deliverables and typically well-defined milestones. And it usually also requires more project management, which we charge for. But you have to have somebody that's actually managing the project with the client. One of the things that we do is when we build a project, the salesperson, the fellow works for us who does all sales, he acts like a liaison with the client, and he keeps the client updated as to what's going on. So part of his responsibility is going to be that if the client says, "Whoa, wait, that's not what I meant," he has to stop us so that we all get back to, okay, where did we go wrong?
Right.
And when you do fixed price contracts, it's important to have milestones. It's important to have the criteria written out as to when is the project finished. Fixed price contracts, one of the downsides is that very easy to get involved in a lot of scope creep. Right? I'm paying you $10,000 to do this, but I also want you to do this, and this on top of it, because I'm already, so you just have to, but that's the job of as the owner of a business, is to manage the delivery of your services.
Yeah, that you mentioned a lot of good things there, Dave, and yeah, that was a lot. And I wanna, so let's see here. I'm kind of reading the chat. I wanna, because I wanna respect your time. Do we have room for one more for Nina, or we can just reroute everybody to
one more question until 2:30.
2:30. All right. Last one from Nina. Do you do the designing or just the implementation of the websites? Because figuring out designs themselves can also take a lot of time, and also if the client doesn't know as much of what they want.
Yeah, so we do the design. I have had projects where the client has brought in their own designer, which typically hasn't been real successful. In fact, right now I'm redoing a website, redesigning it, because the designer, they ended up not, the UX for that design was not particularly great. But when we fix price something, we take into account the fact that we're going to have to do designs and mock-ups. Typically, we'll do 2, 3, sometimes 4 different designs. Go back to the client and say, tell them, here's the different designs. You don't have to pick 1 or 2 or 3. You can say, look, I like that font, but I like it, in design number 1, but I like the color in number 2. And, I like the hero image in number 3. And so we build that into our fixed price. And that's part of the value of fixed price is you don't have to tell them, the client, exactly how much effort you're putting into something. If you're using Figma, for example, to do your mock-ups, you do the initial mock-up, and then modifying it takes very little time in comparison. And your creativity isn't based on how many hours you work, and you come up with an idea and you make that idea real, and whether it took you 10 minutes or 10 hours, that's up to you. That's your creativity. And I'm sure there are projects where it's taken us more time to do the design than we anticipated. On the other hand, there's projects where I anticipated taking a lot of time, and the first thing we show them, they go, "Oh, that's great. Let's do that." Okay. And then, by the way, you have to know when you won, right? Don't say, "Well, I have these other 2 to show you." You say, "No."
That's it.
Right?
There we go.
You're ready to buy the car. What's the joke? You don't want a car salesman who spends 2 hours selling you on a car, and then you say, "Okay, I'm ready to buy it." Well, but we also have this car too.
Yeah.
Right. So know when you've won.
I like that. Know when you've won. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think that is it. Dave, thank you so much for the extra time you gave us today and answering everybody's questions. It's just been amazing. Everybody has been like, we need a 3-part series of this, so maybe another time. Hopefully we haven't drained you too much today, but it's been a pleasure, man, and I hopefully we have you in the Discord. You're an amazing resource there. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already, you can find all of Dave's contact, website information down in the description. He's also part of our amazing community that you can also find, link in the description down below. You can join. We have 3,800 some creatives nowadays making amazing things in our community, so definitely join, learn from Dave and other amazing creatives as well. So Dave, do you have any final words for our community before we let you go?
No, I want to thank you, Brandon, for giving me the opportunity. I love the Discord community, by the way. I have learned so much from the people there that I would encourage everybody to join and to participate. Sometimes we just kind of chit chat, but even that teaches you a lot. So every once in a while, wonderful little tidbits, particularly with Editor X and Figma. So
definitely, thank you so much, man. So Dave, one last applause for you, my friend.
Thank you, Brandon. It has been a true pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend. All right, I'm gonna let you run. I'm gonna close out the show. You can feel free to close the tab and have an amazing rest of your day. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, take it easy. All right, guys, that was the first episode we've had with David Rosenblatt, the man who's literally helped create part of literally created part of the internet. 30 years of experience, agency owner, entrepreneur. I can't fit all of his accolades in one, but it's just been amazing. And I can't wait to not only have you guys join our community and just see the amazing gems he leaves for us there, but hopefully we can bring him on again for a part 2. But I want to close out the show with a quote from our guy Ari. Not everyone can become a great Wix developer, but a great Wix developer can come from anywhere. Rata Ari. All right. Thank you guys for hanging out. If you want to join our community, links are down in the description. I also wanted to share with you guys, if you are trying to learn Figma or get better with your workflow, etc., we actually have a new event starting tomorrow with our friend Wolfgang. He is doing an hour workshop in our Discord. Let me see if I can actually share my screen. I should be able to. If not, that'll be a problem. Okay, I am sharing my screen, just the wrong one. Just bear with me. So if you guys want to actually go to our Discord here in the events, whoopsies. In our events, we have Figmatic Magic with Wolfgang. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So if you guys want to join our community Discord, hop into this tomorrow at 1 p.m. EST. It will be in our Discord. That would be awesome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. Thank you so much. Do not forget to subscribe, like this video. Check out more of David's amazing work. Links down in the description. You can also contact him there. But I also want to give you guys a little bit more of some resources from some of the things that we've talked about today. We talked a lot about structuring a business, taxes, and things of that nature. So I have 3 to 4 of my favorite books that I want to give you guys. Not give, but for you guys to go ahead and check out. For all things taxes, I highly recommend you guys watch or read Power of Zero. Basically, that is just how to, that is one of my favorite books. That's when I really learned I needed a new CPA. Basically, it gives you like red flags of, what is not a good CPA, what is a good CPA, what type of bookkeeper you really should have, things you want to keep in, you want to look out for somebody you actually want to work with. And also talks about like how you are the only one that can help save on taxes for your business and how you need to think about the correct activities for things to actually be tax deductible, and your partner in making sure that actually happens is your bookkeeper and CPA. Also highly recommend Tax-Free Wealth by it's a series book by Rich Dad Poor Dad. Highly recommend that. Another one is the Tax and Legal Playbook. And if you guys are wanting to learn a little bit more about how to structure your corporation, you can also read Start Your Own Corporation. It's also another Rich Dad Poor Dad book in their collection. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys in our Discord. Take it easy. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow in our Figmatic Magic event. See you guys. Bye. Gentlemen, thank you so much for watching and tuning into this episode of Real Talk, brought to you by EditorX, the world's most powerful no-code web design platform for designers and creatives alike. If you want to watch more amazing videos like this, check out our playlist down in the description with all of our Real Talk episodes, including other educational videos like EditorX tutorials. And also, do not forget to subscribe, hit the bell notification so you get notified each week when we go live, and of course, if you feel so inclined, don't forget to smash the like button because it helps us reach more creatives like yourself each and every day. With that said, I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day, and I hope to see you guys on the next one. With that said, Brandon Groce, out.